Hi, I'm Mary Van Buren, President of the Canadian Construction Association. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss best practices as they apply to COVID-19. And today's focus will be on the civil sector. The most recent edition of the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card showed that 40% of bridges and roads are in fair, poor, or very poor condition. And the estimated investment to bring these up to appropriate standard is about $90 billion. So we know there's already an important case for investing in civil infrastructure. And certainly with COVID-19, it's very important that all levels of government work together so that the industry can help bring Canada back to recovery. So I'm really delighted to have two panelists here with me today. Quentin Huillery, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Ledcor, and my colleague from the Saskatchewan Heavy Construction Association, Shantel Lipp. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, nice to have you. So COVID-19 has certainly changed the way that we work. I mean, look at us using Zoom technology, for example, and we certainly expect that this change will continue for some time. And as I am able to see what's been done across the country, firms have done a lot of great work in making sure that very stringent health protocols are in place. So Quentin, maybe you can talk about how Ledcor has prioritized the health and safety of your workforce, and maybe what are some of the challenges that are still there?
Sure, and thanks for having me, Mary. Like many of our industry peers, the safety of our employees is our highest priority at Ledcor. As it relates to the current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have, of course, communicated the importance of not being ill at our work sites. And we've implemented reporting protocols to ensure employees with symptoms or those that have been exposed to others having the illness are not further exposing their coworkers. If employees don't feel safe for whatever reason on our work sites, we've supported them by allowing them to go home without negative consequences. We've implemented temperature checks on many of our work sites, and we're doing daily pre-access screening of our entire workforce to ensure we manage the risk of further exposure. We have, of course, also implemented processes on proper site hygiene and physical distancing, and we've created specific safe work practices for activities that cannot be done without close contact. In addition, we've created an audit tool to verify compliance with all the processes and protocols that have been developed. We've also implemented weekly updates to communicate to the workforce on the status of our COVID-19 related efforts and to provide direction on tools to assist and manage the anxiety being felt both at home and on the job. We've created specific feedback loops to provide the opportunity for our workforce to ask questions and receive answers to those questions in our regular communication and via social media. The other thing I would say is that at Ledcor, we have an expectation of making relationships matter. And externally, we've done so by committing to share all our COVID-19 response protocols and information with various industry associations, including the CCA, in order to help others in the development of their own processes. And finally, Mary, with regards to the challenge that still needs to be addressed, I would say that not allowing complacency to set in relating to the protocols that have been put in place will be key. We need to do so in order to ensure that we avoid any potential second wave as we restart some of the work that has been deemed non-essential.
Yeah, thank you so much for reminding me about how the industry has really come together to share those best practices, and so that the industry as a whole can maintain the highest possible standards. And Ledcor and many others, you've been so generous in sharing those resources. So thank you for that. And Shantel, speaking of resources, maybe what are some of the resources that you've made available to your members of the Saskatchewan Heavy Construction Association?
Well, one of the things that we have been working on is we've actually been working quite closely with our safety association to establish some training protocols that can be implemented not just now, but in the future. So should we find ourselves in a situation similar to one we're in right now, we have some mechanisms already in place for proper training and that type of thing. Some of the other things that we have been doing is we've been working very closely with our government to make sure that our members are able to comply with the new rules and the regulations. We've also been working with Tourism Saskatchewan because a lot of our members are mobile. They work in remote locations. And so we've been doing a lot of work with the Municipalities Association as well as Tourism Saskatchewan to make sure that when crews are coming into small communities, there's an assurance that the proper protocols are in place. There are safe sanitation and safety measures being put in place. So kind of trying to calm the anticipated fear of having 20 or 30 additional non-residents coming into your community. The other thing that we're doing is working with our members on business continuity plans. This is a brand new world that we're living in, and so we're trying to help our members learn from this experience and put measures in place to help offset any negative impacts that are going to come from this. We've lobbied the provincial government on looking at contracts that were in place prior to COVID-19 and trying to help our members mitigate any potential financial risks that weren't anticipated at the time of bid. So we've been staying in constant contact with the members, with government, and just trying to help everybody, navigate this new world. There was a lot of uncertainty about financial risks that the contractors would have to take on. How are we going to manage our human resources moving forward? How are we going to maintain safety on the job site? And so we've implemented a portal on the SHCA website to house all of that information, so the members have a one-stop shop and can go and find out if, looking at potential workers' compensation claims. COVID-19 is not a job-related illness, but what happens when one of our workers comes in contact with somebody at a gas station or a restaurant and now has to self-isolate? Working with government on trying to help members in terms of site occupancy costs. What happens when a job site gets shut down, or if a job site gets shut down? How do we manage some of those risks? So we've tried to compile as much information as we possibly can for the members, and we send out weekly, if not daily, updates on any new information that we obtain, whether it's from government or from new best practices in terms of safety, new regulations, all of that kind of thing.
Both you and Quentin have also talked about, I think, an important element, which is communications. And this came up on a discussion we had with the FOMAC group as well, which is how important it is to communicate with your workforce, to communicate with the broader community, like you talked about, Tourism Saskatchewan, and with each other, so that we can do the best possible thing we can for our industry and for Canada. And we are starting to see a glimmer of hope now, with the curve starting to flatten in some regions, and several provinces have begun to gradually reopen. I believe Saskatchewan is May 4th, and yep. Alberta has opened some things today. So that's good to see that we've all been working hard to get to that outcome for Canada. So Quentin, Alberta, as we know, has already been very hard hit by the downturn in oil and gas, and now we've had COVID-19 on top of this. What are your thoughts on how maybe the civil sector can help Alberta out of the recession?
You're absolutely right, Mary. There is no doubt that Alberta has been hard hit, but we're a very resilient bunch. And I think specifically about Fort McMurray and the resolve of the folks in that region to deal with wildfires, economic downturn, a pandemic, and now the flooding that's going on. And I was there earlier this week, and the tenacity of the people in that region really inspires the rest of us in Alberta. And specific to our industry, I think our keen ability to identify and manage risk, including the safety of our workforce and others, well positions our industry to help lead the return to work and the required financial turnaround. Providing Albertans and Canadians with well-paying construction jobs that will improve the infrastructure of the province and Canada as a whole will pay dividends now and in the future. The alternative scenario is one in which these folks are forced to rely on social handouts. In Alberta, the provincial government has realized this and has allocated $410 million in stimulus funds for Alberta transportation projects this construction season. This will see jobs and economic spin-off in every part of the province, provided that red tape and administrative burdens don't get in the way. Doing needed repairs and upgrades now will also result in benefit to the province in reducing financial liability associated with deferred maintenance. In general, I would say that Canada has lagged behind our global counterparts who have been improving their transportation infrastructure, and this is an opportunity to catch up and keep Alberta and the rest of Canada competitive coming out of this pandemic. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Quentin. The resilience is incredible. How quickly the industry did adapt to so many of the things which Shantel mentioned as well, whether it was liquidity concerns, staffing, health protocols, and so that resilience of the industry is very admirable. Shantel, thinking about the situation in Saskatchewan, how do you see your members prioritizing getting back to recovery and how that can help Saskatchewan?
One of the good things about the civil sector is that we are probably in the best position to hit the ground running and get back to, as close to normal as we possibly can. The heavy construction sector in Saskatchewan is responsible for about 30,000 jobs here in the province. And we actually, on a normal year, account for about 7% of the provincial GDP. So making sure that the season can resume as quickly as possible and as close to normal as possible, I think right now is key. Jobs are of utmost concern. There's a lot of people right now that are out of work, not just in our sector. I mean, we're probably, like I said, best positioned to resume as close to normal as we possibly can. But I know that in other areas, one that comes to mind quickly is the city of Regina just laid off about 850 of their seasonal and outdoor workers right now. So, I mean, there's potential for the heavy civil industry to possibly absorb some of those jobs and get these people back to work as quickly as possible. So we've been working closely with the government. They haven't announced a stimulus package as of yet, but we are aware that there is one coming. So we're anticipating an announcement within the next week or two. And I think that will really help, bolster the economy as quickly as we can get guys back to work and start pumping money back into our provincial economy is going to be key right now.
And there is money available through the Invest in Canada plan too. I think Saskatchewan was only about at 15% of the total that's available. So that's something that we also want to work on with the federal government and certainly with all provinces to make sure that money does flow from the feds to the province, to the municipalities who need it. And as you say, civil sector can get to work very quickly. So an important sector for that. So a final question for both of you. We weren't expecting the COVID-19 for sure. And Shantel, you mentioned some of the business continuity planning that you're looking at. So, from each of you, what's one lesson learned that we should be applying to the future to keep our businesses resilient? So maybe start with you, Shantel.
Well, this is the new normal, I think. So I think that there's been a lot of lessons learned just going through this pandemic. And I think that our members for sure are going to have to adapt their business plans and start looking at, first of all, safety. That safety has always been key for our sector, but there's new elements to safety now that have to be considered. And I think that's going to have to continue. There's just so many things that have changed so quickly. I know members have implemented new protocols for their employees. They're rigging their equipment and their vehicles to allow their employees to travel safely. And I think it's just, a means of adapting to what we consider to be the new norm. As I said before, I think that one of the benefits to the heavy civil sector is that we can really hit the ground running. We're probably in one of the better positions in terms of social distancing and ways to keep our employees safe. So I think it's just a matter of being diligent in how we do that and making sure that employees are relaying that message to their employees and remaining consistent with that. Yeah,
so that kind of builds on what Quentin said, the not getting into complacency.
Yes.
going to be a challenge for all of us. So Quentin, last word to you in terms of any advice or tips in how we can continue to be well prepared for future pandemics or disruptions.
Yeah, I think that when I think about that, Mary, I think that one thing I'm proud of is that our industry has utilized the fact that there's strength in numbers, and that cooperation amongst industry peers to me has been a key factor. And many of these peers are competitors in the industry as well. So that collaboration on defining appropriate protocols and aligning on requests for required industry support, I think, is a key factor and one that I'm proud of for our industry. And I'm proud of the CCA as well as and other associations like the ARHCA here in Alberta, and same Heavy Civil Association in Saskatchewan as well. I mean, they've been key facilitators in this effort, and I'm proud to see that that's worked so well.
Yeah, and on that note, we do know that the industry can and will play an important role in recovery, and that coming together is so important. And that's why we're asking our members to please send a letter in to your member of parliament. CCA would like to have the federal government prepare a COVID-19 reimbursement program for federal contracts so that the contractors and everybody who's involved in that project can have some peace of mind about all the extra costs that have been assumed by the contractor. So we invite you to send a letter to your MP. So thank you again so much, Shantel and Quentin. It's been great talking to you and nice to see you via Zoom. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.